Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, I want to give you a quick behind the scenes look at this whole being a reviewer thing. Now, when it comes to reviewing radar detectors, in my opinion, I think it's really important to be this objective, unbiased tester, right? And part of that means you don't get paid by manufacturers to go say good things about their products, right? You don't do paid or sponsored reviews. And that's always a big concern that people have. And I think in terms of doing reviews, you got to talk about the good and the bad, right? Everything's got pros and cons. And the way that plays out with radar detectors, for example, is, all right, let's talk about how much protection is it going to offer you on the road? You know, performance, filtering, capabilities, all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, we also got to take a look at the weaknesses of the detector. In what ways does it have some vulnerabilities that could actually lead to you inadvertently getting a ticket where the radar detector doesn't give you the performance that you actually need, right? So we got to talk about the good and the bad. That way you fully understand the capabilities and the limitations of the product. Now, when it comes to doing these reviews, you know, that balance I think is really important. Now, there's this kind of subtle and insidious pull to be slightly more negative with the reviews. And in this video, I want to talk about that. It's not something that's addressed often or at all, but it's something really interesting that I've noticed over the years. And so I want to go ahead and talk about kind of one of these important external pulls that could actually affect the reviews, and specifically what I do about it. Now, something really interesting that I've noticed over the years is kind of what happens at the extremes if you're too positive versus too negative in a review. For example, let's say you're going to be very positive and you're like, dude, this is awesome. This product is great. The performance is fantastic. The filtering is great. It's a good bang for the buck. The price is good. The customer service is awesome. People are like, is this a paid ad? Are you paid by the manufacturer? Are you being a shill? Like, you start getting all that kind of stuff, right? People have this knee-jerk reaction of like, nothing can be this good. It's almost too good to be true, and it's totally understandable that people start to get skeptical. So you actually start to get a negative reaction if you're too positive. That's not the same, though, if you start being really negative. If you start being negative and you're like, the marketing says this, but in reality, nope, the performance doesn't add up, the filtering sucks, this is a waste of your money, avoid. Here's all the issues of the detector. If you do that, people are like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for being honest. Thank you for telling me the truth. You know, people typically have a really good reaction to when you're being negative. And so if you're negative, people like it. If you're positive, and especially too positive, people don't like it. Now, it's not quite that black and white. Of course, there's more nuance to it. There's more shades of gray. Like if you're negative, well, the manufacturer is not going to like it. Or if somebody's emotionally invested in that product, they may not like the fact that you're slamming their product on the internet, and then they'll accuse you of being, well, sponsored by a competing manufacturer or whatever kind of stuff people want to come up with, you know? So it's not quite that black and white, but overall, the trend is if you're too positive, people don't like it. If you're too negative, people actually do like that. And so for that reason, you actually get slightly incentivized or motivated to be a little bit more negative, a little bit more negative, a little bit more negative. Because then, oh, you're so objective, you're unbiased, you're honest, you're telling me the truth because you're being more negative. Now, it's not that big of a deal for one or two reviews, but when this kind of pull to continuously be a little bit more negative, a little bit more negative, a little bit more negative happens over the years, you start to just become more negative, you know, without necessarily even realizing it. And then you can get to the point where you're like, pick any radar detector. I'll tell you all the flaws. You want to know about the performance, the filtering issues, the GPS lockout algorithm issues, customer service issues, the arrow transition issues. Like, pick anything. The way they advertise spectrum immunity is not. Pick any detector, and you can like just hammer on all the flaws. But then if you really go down that route, yes, you can really know about all the weaknesses. But if you get hyper focused on the weaknesses, you kind of at the point where like, I don't like this stuff. Everything sucks. Everything has issues. Like, man, why did I get involved with this? You know, and you wind up almost resenting radar detectors. You're like, why isn't anything good enough? And that's a really lousy place to be in. That's not something that I expected, especially because I'm overall like an upbeat, happy, optimistic guy, you know? And I'm like, this stuff is great. What happened? And you kind of have to take a step back and be like, what's going on? Why am I not liking this as much? And I've noticed this is actually a really big thing. It's small to where you're like a little bit more incentivized to be more negative, more negative, more negative. And that I find really, really interesting. And so because of that, I'm like having to actually take a step back and not getting super focused on the details, on the nitty gritty sometimes, even though that can be very useful, especially as somebody who's very detail oriented. It's also, I'm finding it helpful to take a step back and be like, yes, while all that negative stuff is true, it's also true that we have a lot of really good options for radar detectors from many different manufacturers. No, of course, none of them are perfect. There's no one size fits all, and there's no detector that does everything right. Everything has pros and cons, like I mentioned at the very beginning. But at the same time, we're fortunate to have a lot of great options. If you pick almost any good radar detector, chances are you're going to wind up with a good experience. Of course, you may find that detector A may be a little bit better optimized to where you drive, or maybe better suited to your personality or preferences, of course, right? Everything's got their own kind of niches and optimizations and trade-offs. But nevertheless, we have a lot of really good options, and we're fortunate that you can pick anything good from most any of the manufacturers, and chances are, overall, you're going to have a good experience, and you're going to have protection that you need to keep you protected when you're on the road. And that's really what this is about. And I think it's easy sometimes to lose sight of that when you start focusing more on the negative because, well, you get reinforced for being more negative than positive. And that's something I notice really interesting. People are always focused on, well, if you're being too positive, you're paid, you're sponsored, you're a shill, right? That's the main knee-jerk reaction that I see, especially from people who are new, who don't know me very well and don't actually know how this works. And I also find it interesting that there's other external factors too that can, well, motivate you to be more negative. And that could be just the encouragement of like, wow, you're so honest, you're so objective, blah, 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 because you're telling the truth, you're being negative. And so I just wanted to point that out as kind of one of the things that I'm taking a look at. I'm always, I listen to every comment, I read every single comment, all that kind of stuff. And I'm also spending a lot of time like, am I being fair? Am I being reasonable? Am I being direct? Is there anything that's compelling me for whatever reason to say something more positive or something more negative? And this is just kind of something interesting that I've noticed that I wanted to address directly and point out. And so, yeah, it's something that is really important to me. It's something that I'm always spending a lot of time thinking about, and just something that I wanted to go ahead and share. And I'm like, here's an area where I just need to be aware of this, and I can be more conscious and deliberate about how I want to approach this and be like, you know what, the fact is we have a lot of good options, and yes, everything has weaknesses and everything has strengths, but let's not get pulled too negative in the same way that you don't want to get too positive either. And so finding that healthy balance in the middle somewhere, I think is actually really helpful. And so anyway, yeah, just want to do a quick video talking about this. It's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and it's something that I just wanted to address directly and share with you guys. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff that I want to talk about in terms of reviews, in terms of radar in general and laser and all this kind of stuff. And so I definitely want to start getting back into doing something like this, kind of these 5-Minute Friday series. And we're going to start getting back into like talking about specifics in terms of radar in general. But before we do that, I just wanted to go ahead and address this topic directly because it's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I wanted to go ahead and just make sure that we address it. And so, yeah, with that said, let's start getting back into radar detectors. Let's start getting back into testing and comparisons and reviews and all that kind of stuff. And I'm super excited, really, to get back into this and resume sharing it with you guys. And so, yeah, thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are all doing great, and I'll see you in the next video.